Good morning. The first meeting of the Greenway in January 25th, 2013 is about to begin, and we always, Sarah dear, would you lead us in a Pledge of Allegiance?
All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Wonderful as always. Thank you, Sarah. And Sarah and I are co-chairs of this meeting, as always. Sarah always leads with the Pledge of Allegiance, and the second item is to introduce ourselves. I'm Barney McHenry. This is Sarah Griffin. And
I'm Assemblymember Dee Dee Barrett, 106th Assembly District.
Mark
Molinaro, Dutchess County Executive.
Aileen Moore, Town of Hyde Park Supervisor.
Phil Gordon, Regional Director of New York State Fire and Transportation.
Ned Ames, member of the council.
Jane Daniels, member of the Conservancy.
Jennifer Schwartz-Berkey, member of the Conservancy.
Linda Bonderheide, member of Council.
Betsy Jacks, Thomas Cole National Historic Site.
Bonnie Devine, New York State Department of State.
Don Mara, member of the Conservancy.
Greg Hellsborough, council member representing Ulster County.
Frank Bergman, Hudson River Boat and Yacht Club Association.
And now over to you.
Mark Castiglione, I'm the acting executive director of the Hudson River Valley Greenway and National Heritage Area.
Sasha Spector, Director of Conservation Science for Scenic Hudson.
Scott Keller, I work for him.
Kevin Burke, Greenway Conservancy Board Member.
Sally Mazzarella, representing Senator Steve Salan.
Bob Elliott, Council Board Member.
Ted Buckley, Living Council Board Member of Albany County.
Stefan Yarabek, Greenway Conservancy.
Fran Dunwell, Hudson River Estuary Program, representing AEC Commissioner Martens.
Conservancy member.
Sandy Gallup, Assembly Member and Greenway Council.
And I guess from the right, please. Miss?
Can't see her.
Yeah. Who's that? I can't see.
Sarah Olson.
Oh, Sarah. Sarah Griffin. Oh, my God. Sarah Griffin.
National Park Service.
Thank you, Sarah, for letting us on the premises.
Excuse me, Barney. Welcome, everybody.
Jan Blair, the Village of Irvington, and the Hudson River Watershed Alliance.
Good morning, Glenn Gadali, Barton and LaJudas Engineering.
I don't think that the mic is on.
Mark Wildonger, planner with Scenic Hudson.
Tom Scaglione with Assemblymember Dee Dee Barrett.
Bob Lacola, Supervisor, Town of Fishkill.
Nancy Gold with the Gold Standard Marketing Communications and Historic Hudson River Towns.
Jerry Fiala, Historic Hudson River Towns.
Robert Deary, Comptroller for the Town of Newcastle.
Barney Malloy, Hudson River Water Trail Association.
Adam Pellizzeri, Cold Spring, Vice Chair of the Special Board for Comprehensive Plan and LWRP.
Anita Padala, Director, National Purple Heart Hall of Honor.
Ray Drakowski, Morris Associates, Town Engineer for Town of Greenport.
Hi, Tom Martinelli, former Conservancy Board Member, Martinelli Custom Publishing, publisher of Amtrak New York by Rail magazine.
Marjorie Block, President of Saugerties Historical Society.
Mark Smith, Board Member of the Saugerties Historical Society and Chair of the Chamber of Commerce, Saugerties.
Linda Aldrich, Red Hook Town Historian.
Jamie Reppert, National Heritage Area Advisory Board.
John Burroughs Association and Slab Sites, where we are building gorgeous new twig gates with thanks to Greenway.
Carl Beard with the National Park Service Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program.
Bill Merchant, President of the D&H Canal Historical Society and Vice Chair of the Delaware and Hudson Transportation Council.
Susan Roller Brown, Grant Consultant.
John Clark, Dutchess County Planning.
Laura Heady, Hudson River Estuary Program.
Sally Decker, Mid-Hudson Adirondack Mountain Club.
Kathleen Davis, Town of Hyde Park Recreation Department and Hyde Park Trails.
Jim Johnson, Executive Director, Hudson River Valley Institute at Marist College.
Thank you very much. And in response to Sarah's unspoken question, I don't drive without my glasses, Sarah. So there's no, but now we have an interesting program. And Sarah Griffin, would you introduce me?
Absolutely. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Assemblywoman Dee Dee Barrett. Assemblywoman Barrett was elected last March and then was re-elected to everyone's great pleasure this January or in November. She comes with an amazing resume, obviously deeply rooted in the Hudson Valley, from the Hudson Valley originally, or okay, but just an extensive record of community service, actually with a great passion for agriculture, therefore on a number of different organizations, Poughkeepsie Plenty, Poughkeepsie Farmers Alliance with the Walkway Over the Hudson, a very strong advocate for women's leadership, but just overall it just seems that there's such a wonderful track record of very serious work to protect the natural and cultural resources in the valley. So we're delighted to invite her to speak today.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you all. I just really want to welcome you here to Hyde Park and to the new 106th Assembly District, which I continue to describe as one of the most beautiful certainly in the state, probably in the country, and I'm very proud to be representing this district. And I'm very proud to be part of the work that you're doing. This legislation was pioneering when it began and groundbreaking in all sorts of ways, literally and figuratively, but essential for being sure that this incredible part of the state that many of us are so blessed and fortunate to be living in, stays the way we want it to stay. And that means taking advantage of the very best of the region to be the economic engines that bring the jobs and keep the economy sustainable here in the Hudson Valley. And that means recognizing our tourism and our history and our agriculture and our natural beauty and our other resources that are real economic engines. And those are the things that I'm working on. I look forward to continuing to work with all of you on that and to be a resource in any possible way that I can. And thank you again for the opportunity to be here with you. Thanks.
Eileen, you're next. And this is the first anniversary of your appearance last year at she's now been the town supervisor of the town of Hyde Park, which is where we are, and we're delighted to be back. And if you have a few words to say, we should be most grateful.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Hyde Park. I'd like to thank Sarah and Barnabas for inviting me, and thank everyone on the Greenway Council for the great work you've done. And I hope when you entered to Hyde Park and when you leave, if you go to the south, you'll notice some of the great things that have been happening here. We've made a lot of progress on redevelopment, and we've embraced a lot of the principles of smart growth that the Greenway has instilled in all of us. So if you look around, if you head south, you'll see we've done a major redevelopment of the Stop and Shop Plaza, the Dunkin' Donuts. The National Park Service has redone their entrance. We have several gas stations right on 9 on our corridor that have been redeveloped. And again, I just want to give my appreciation for Greenway for instilling those principles. And we've adopted those into our zoning code, and now you can see them being implemented. So I would also like to thank the Greenway for the grants that they have awarded to Hyde Park in the last few years. They awarded a shared service grant, and we are working with the Northern Dutchess Alliance to study shared services and find ways that we can improve our local economy through better efficiency of government. So we'd like to thank the Greenway for that very generous award. We also received a grant for the Hyde Park Trails, and we are creating a new connection at the Mills Norrie Park, which is to the north here. It's in Statsburg. They awarded money so that we can create 2 trailhead kiosks with interpretive panels and trail maps. So thank you for that. But the third grant, and this is the one that we are most excited about, is as Greenway awarded us a grant to supplement one that we are working on through Dutchess County Planning. I see we have John Clark here, and also the Dutchess County Poughkeepsie Transportation Council, and we have the DOT represented here. So in May of 2012, Hyde Park was chosen from among several municipal applicants to receive assistance from the PDCTC to evaluate our town sidewalks, assess who is using them, and suggest concrete steps to improve pedestrian movement in the town's commercial centers. Using federal funds, the Transportation Council and Dutchess County Department of Planning inventoried our sidewalks, our crosswalks, and parking, and have come up with a report which, with the help of the Greenway, will be incorporated into our comprehensive plan and our zoning. It will also include a redesign for one of our key intersections to create a more viable, walkable, mixed-use center. And it's in a priority growth area, and we will also be including a recommendation for a historic overlay for the area of our town known as the Crossroads. So again, I want to just express my gratitude to the state and the federal and the county and the Greenway for helping Hyde Park achieve some of our goals. And thank you for letting me speak as well.
Thank you, Dee Dee, and thank you again, Sarah, for letting us come here. The cleanup hitter on this introduction, of course, is Mark Molinaro. And it's all in one string because it was, let me see, it was Dee Dee's seat. Mark's seat that I took. Yeah, Mark's seat that Dee Dee took, right? Okay, and now they're sitting next to each other. Right. And
he got a better job.
And, yeah. Well, he's the youngest. He's the youngest county supervisor in the history of Dutchess County, we believe. Sure. And but much more important to us is the fact that we wouldn't be here but for Mark Molinaro. The tapestry of programs and organizations in the Hudson River Valley is considerable. And it would have, we would only have been part of that tapestry but for Mark Molinaro. About 3 years ago, I guess it was, 3 years ago, some people in Albany got the notion that it would be worthwhile, useful, and cost-effective to dispense with the Greenway. Mark led the charge, and here we are. And Mark Molinaro, I don't care what you ever do, call in the middle of the night, collect. We'll do anything for you. Right.
Did you bring your checkbook? Barney, that was very, very kind and much appreciated. I don't know, as Dee Dee joked with me, at some point there will be a time when my introduction doesn't begin with "he's the youngest," whatever. Although that will be the time that I wished my introduction began with "he's the youngest," whatever. But it is my pleasure to welcome you all back to Dutchess County, and for me, the Greenway and these meetings is very much like old home week. I get to see many of my friends. It seems to me, in fact, ever since probably 1999, I have been a member of the Greenway, one of the two boards, in one capacity or another, having completed recently as the representative of the Assembly Minority. It's very nice to see my good friend Sandy Galiff here from the Assembly Majority, and she represents that conference well here. I do want to note something that we were discussing before. But there is a critical need for individuals like Sandy and Dee Dee and our new state senator, Terry Gibson, here in Dutchess County, to really receive the support and input necessary to be strong advocates and aggressive advocates for the Hudson River Valley Greenway. Why? Because, quite frankly, the voice of the Hudson Valley has been weakened over the last several elections and certainly over the last couple of years. That's not a reflection, certainly, of the individuals who currently represent us. It is sort of the reality with Senator Steve Saland no longer representing this district, and Maurice Hinchy no longer fighting on behalf of the Hudson Valley as an elected official. We as a region must come together and really work together, ignore party affiliation, ignore those differences that too often keep us apart, and focus on being a strong and effective voice for this region. And without the Greenway, and without your advocacy and the support that our elected officials need, the Hudson River Valley's voice in Albany and Washington will be weakened. For nearly a decade and a half, there were those in this state that felt that the Hudson River got too much attention, and the Hudson River Valley received too much attention. And the concept of preserving our natural resources and webbing together this great region of ours wasn't as important as building things in Buffalo, or perhaps in other parts of the state. So for us, we need to ensure that we have a strong and effective voice, and the only way to do that is to continue to aggressively advocate and support our elected officials in Albany and Washington. To our elected officials in Albany and Washington, hear them. This organization has been a proud and aggressive representative and advocate for the Hudson River Valley and all the things that we hold dear for a number of years. I want to share with you just one, as Barney said, I could have as long as I needed. You are in Dutchess County, and there are sheriff's deputies on Route 9, so you really can't go anywhere until I'm done. But I do want to share with you one initiative that we launched publicly yesterday. It's really this county's recommitment to ensuring that our communities see revitalization. Too often, county government in particular acts as somewhat of a silent partner when it comes to municipal development. Having served 12 years as a village mayor, I can tell you that I still recognize today that all things are exceptionally personal. And for those of you who are supervisors or mayors, you know that the issues that consume our time are generally of a very personal nature. County government has the ability, more so than any other layer of government, to be a real partner, to bring together the different stakeholders in any one community to bring about growth. But I want to offer you this. Franklin Lloyd Wright, who of course his influence can be seen throughout the Hudson River Valley, said American architect Daniel Hudson Burnham made masterful use of the methods and men of his time. In the midst of 19th century urban disorder, Burnham powerfully imagined what an American city could look like. Creating urban plans for Washington, D.C., Chicago, Cleveland, and San Francisco, he sought to reconcile things often thought opposite: the practical and the ideal, business and art, capitalism and democracy. Burnham was quoted as saying, "Make no little plans. They have no magic to stir men's blood and probably themselves will not be realized. Make big plans, aim high in hope, and work." Some say he invented urban planning. I think John Clark appreciates his work, his earlier work. Of course, John's much younger and wasn't around for Burnham. Others would note that Burnham himself was a paradox, efficient and indulgent, pragmatist and dreamer. As Barney offered to me, I'm not often politically correct, so I'll continue in that theme. It isn't all that politically correct these days to suggest that government ought to do big things any longer. Many equate bold vision and the use of imagination with waste and unsustainable cost. So let me offer to you that my belief is that government's tired, stale adherence to the safe plane of mediocrity has too often produced failure, folly, and abuse of tax dollars. It seems to me, and those of us in Dutchess County, if we're to overcome our fiscal challenges, we must dream big, imagine what may be possible, of course living within our financial means, and accept that we may not accomplish all the things we set out to achieve. But just last night, this county launched a new collaborative in partnership with the City of Poughkeepsie. We hosted the first of a series of public workshops to generate dialogue and input for the waterfront redevelopment strategy and rezoning project. This is an unprecedented partnership and bringing together of private stakeholders, coordinated by Dutchess County Planning and Development and funded by our county's own Dyson Foundation. While the waterfront redevelopment strategy centers on the Hudson River shoreline between the Mid-Hudson Bridge and phenomenally successful walkway over the Hudson. It's cold, but it's still worth the visit. Around the Metro North train station. Our transit-oriented development and our approach will also feature connections to the new walkway elevator, north and south along the river, and to the town of Poughkeepsie, to the Mount Carmel neighborhood, and lower Main Street. This bold and sweeping redevelopment strategy includes plans for major park improvements, green infrastructure initiatives, and economic feasibility and financial analysis, phasing steps, and draft waterfront rezoning. Let me offer to you that this plan for the city of Poughkeepsie is indeed grand in scope, and the goal is to build upon the recent riverfront successes and set in motion a strategy to develop a world-class riverfront right here in Dutchess County along the Hudson River. Why do I note this? This county can be a part of great collaboration, can be the catalyst, if you will, for growth. We have 20 towns, 8 villages, and 2 cities of significant importance, all struggling to define themselves and seek great growth and revitalization in a number of ways. For us, if we are to see economic benefit, if we are to see a celebration of this county and this community and this region's great natural resources, man-made and architectural history, it is necessary for us to invest our time, talent, and resources in our city and village centers. That's, and they are, the critical components to any community's growth. For Dutchess County, we will no longer sit on the sideline with the city of Poughkeepsie. We will work with them, certainly in partnership. Their leadership and their community are interested in seeing growth, and we have the talent, the resources, the know-how, and the ability to provide continuity, to provide leadership, and to provide investment. And I hope that in the very near future, upon one of your next visits and returns to Dutchess County, you will, like us, celebrate and enjoy a robust waterfront, a wonderful and dynamic city center, and a great and world-class opportunity right here in Dutchess County. And be assured that the work that you have done and this organization continues to do sets in motion and has inspired so many of us to imagine and dream big and to put into action great and big plans. God bless you all. Keep up the great work, and welcome to Dutchess County.
Well, that was quite inspiring. Thank you. It just, between the three of you, I feel that it just, it really gives such credence to the work that we've been doing all these years. So thank you all for your very important remarks. We turn now to our featured presentation for the morning, and I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Sasha Spector, who is Scenic Hudson's Director of Conservation Science. He is working in that capacity to identify new land acquisition targets, as well as when the land has been acquired. As you probably know, Scenic Hudson has many parks and lands that they are managing, but to make sure that they are using best practices in managing that land. He is the point person, very appropriately, for Scenic Hudson on climate change, and has a rich history. It's exhausting even to look at his resume to see what he has done in the past and is currently doing to be take this important role. He is a doctor of his PhD as a conservation biologist, and has worked on 4 continents, examining key biodiversity areas, setting landscape scale conservation priorities, assessing impacts of landscape change, and predicting patterns of species invasion. He's worked at in a number of different capacities, most recently with the American Museum of Natural History, their Center of Biodiversity and Conservation, but he also has been with the Nature Conservancy, the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. He's also an adjunct professor at Columbia University, and he has authored over 20 peer-reviewed articles and books, and has received numerous awards and grants from the National Science Foundation, NASA, Zoological Society of London, and other foundations. And also, I happen to know, has two, right, darling children. I don't know how you do it all, but we are here to benefit greatly from your words today. Thank you, Sasha.
Thanks, Sarah. And thanks for the invitation to be here today. Scenic Hudson is a huge supporter of what the Greenway does and an early booster of the legislation that created it. And I'll just say, for me personally, as a conservation biologist, this is exactly where you want to be. You want to be talking about the science and the latest information that can inform what people like you do on the ground. So it's really exciting for me to try to tell you a little bit about where I think the latest science is on climate change and specifically sea level rise for the Hudson River Valley, and also a little bit about what Scenic Hudson is thinking about and what I think we would love to think about together with you. We live in a really different context than we did just a few months ago. This was the cover of Bloomberg's Business Week in the week after Hurricane Sandy, and this is 23rd Street, just a few blocks from my old apartment before I moved here was. It's Manhattan flooding, and I think for many people, maybe not for everyone, but for many people, Hurricane Sandy changed the way we think about working, living, building, doing business in this part of the world. For those of us, though, who lived through Hurricane Irene and Tropical Storm Lee, though, this wasn't the first time that we've lived through something really catastrophic in the last year or two. And so I think the opportunity here is for New York, for the first time around these disasters, we have a shared upstate, downstate narrative. We have the chance now to knit together a more unified response to these events. And the Greenway spans that entire geography of people and places who are impacted. We also have a tremendous opportunity, too, because we finally have the federal government's attention on these sorts of things. By my calculations, there's over $1.5 billion in the Recovery Act directed at resilience planning and land protection and waterfront rethinking. So there are going to be a lot of resources, and we need to be prepared. We need to be thinking about these challenges in the right ways to both capture and utilize those resources in productive ways. So I'll quickly go through a little bit. Oh, sorry. I'll quickly go through really quickly. You know what? I'm going to stick this monitor right here so I don't have to keep looking at my feet. I'll quickly go through some of the science about what we think the future might hold, and that I think will help set up how we might think about adapting or responding. We're getting warmer. We're already a bit warmer. We're a degree warmer than we were just a couple of decades ago. But depending on our emissions pathway, and I should say, unfortunately, we're on the worst case scenario emissions pathway at this point, we're looking at having the climate of Georgia by the end of this century. If we were to take aggressive action on emissions, controlling our carbon pollution, we have a good chance of limiting that change to essentially the climate of Virginia. So we're living in a changing climate. We're going to be living in a changing climate whether we change our emissions pathway or not. Of course, we have choices about how much that's going to change. And it's a little ironic I'm talking about this. This morning when I checked the weather, we were 30 degrees colder than Anchorage, Alaska. But you have to believe it. Our precipitation patterns are changing as well. We are now moving toward a flashier, more extreme precipitation regime. We're not likely to get a whole lot more water here in the Northeast. Maybe 5%, maybe less by a couple of percent, but it's not going to change a whole lot. But how we get it is going to change a lot. So this is the return period of the current 100-year storm. And this is years. So that old 100-year storm is coming and is going to be coming more and more frequently, which is another way of saying that the real 100-year storm is going to come with more and more rainfall. So what what we actually think of as the 1% probability storm is going to have more rain in it in the future. And this is already happening, interestingly, a little bit faster than the models projected. So this blue line and the trend through it was the predicted rate of change for a number of rainfall events with more than an inch in them. And instead what we're seeing is a trend that has outpaced the models. So we're more quickly moving toward a rainfall scenario where we get most of our rain in fewer, bigger events. And that obviously has real challenges for municipalities and stormwater, for our infrastructure that's not sized appropriately. This was a satellite image of Hurricane Sandy on the afternoon that it came ashore. And what's interesting, you probably can't see from where you're sitting, this is the edge of Lake Superior, and this is Newfoundland, and this is Georgia. This was a tremendous, the largest North Atlantic storm ever recorded. Just an incredibly powerful storm. And whether or not we will see more of these is not clear from the literature. What is kind of clear, though, is that the storms we do see are more likely to be of higher intensity. So the storms we do see are likely to be larger and more powerful. There's also some evidence that there are more storm surge events in warmer years over the last century. Now, that may translate to more meaning that there are more storms in warmer years, and we are having warmer and warmer years. So, but it's not yet clear whether the long-term trend is toward more storms. What's really front of mind for scenic Hudson, and I think almost every riverfront community, is in terms of climate change impacts, though, is sea level rise. And what we've seen over the last century is a fairly consistent rate of sea level rise, about 3 millimeters a year, which doesn't sound like a whole lot. It's a little bit more than an inch a decade. So the Hudson River is about a foot higher than it was a century ago. But that rate is accelerating. And unfortunately, it's accelerating faster in the Northwest Atlantic than it is in other parts of the globe. So we're going to get more than our fair share of sea level rise in the Northeast. And our projections from the New York State Sea Level Rise Task Force put us at somewhere between, if the ice sheets sort of continue to behave the way they seem to be behaving, potentially up to 50 inches of sea level rise by 2080 or by the end of the century. So 50 inches. To put that in context, that's about what the storm surge from Hurricane Irene, not Sandy, but Irene, was last summer, which is a way of visualizing that. If you can remember where the water was on the afternoon that Irene rolled up the Hudson, that's where the high water mark will be twice a day by the end of the century. And we've been doing a lot of modeling to kind of anticipate what that means, both for us as an organization and the communities along the river at Scenic Hudson. This is an inundation model, which you can see goes in 6-inch steps up to 54 inches, so 4.5 feet. And in some parts of the river, we will be losing a significant amount of the shoreline. Over 8,000 acres are in that permanent inundation zone, and many more acres than that will be newly included in the flood zone. So just a fundamental rethinking of what the Hudson River shoreline will look like. Now, what's at stake in that inundation zone touches everything that's sort of near and dear, both the Scenic Hudson and I think the Greenway and the values and missions of the Greenway. World-class biodiversity, the 13,000 acres of globally rare freshwater tidal habitats, and all of the species that rely on them, both permanently and at different times of their migration. The public access that we've all invested in and had fought so hard to maintain or to bring back, and the riverfront communities themselves, the economic engines, these waterfront revitalization opportunities, are squarely in the crosshairs of this changing water zone. So we have a tremendous amount at stake here, and I think what that's doing is setting us up for a century or more of a delicate balancing act, a dance to to balance the needs of the natural world, the Hudson River estuary ecosystem, which sustains the people along it, and the people and the economic and social values that are along the coastlines. So the question, I think, for all of us that we need to grapple with in some respect is how do we adapt in ways that find the right balance, that balance the need to maintain a productive and healthy estuary with the need to maintain productive and healthy communities. And we recognize, too, that adaptation, particularly to something like sea level rise, is a game of inches. Right? What's wet and what's not, and what's at risk and what's not, is very, very site-specific. And every community is going to be different, whether it's the urban centers like Yonkers or little river towns like Rhinecliff. Every place is going to be different. Every place is going to require its own solution, its own mixture of adaptation strategies. And that's a challenge, but also an opportunity to create really durable solutions that speak to the issues on the ground. So we are following 3 primary strategies to essentially prepare the estuary for this time of change, and that is help create resilient riverfront communities, soften our shorelines, and push the envelope on amphibious design for public access points, and protecting tidal wetlands and floodplains. These 3 strategies used in tandem and in different combinations are the way we're going about it. In communities up and down the Hudson, we've been holding revitalizing Hudson riverfront forums with our partners at the Department of Environmental Conservation, at the Department of State, with help from the Consensus Building Institute, and local partners. We've been holding these forums to get people at least grappling with the question and start to give them some tools. We've been working on launching sea level rise task forces like the one we launched in Kingston last month, again with the DEC and the Department of State. And these will be deeper dives into the actual questions that face a specific community and try to come up with some kind of resilience roadmap, a way for them to get to a safer and more secure future. We're also about to launch a website that will allow anybody to come and visualize these maps, print them out for themselves in their communities, understand what kinds of changes and infrastructure is in the way, and those sorts of things. That'll be launching in the next week or 2. Amphibious design is what we're starting to call the design specs for our new parks. This is our kayak pavilion at the Long Dock Park in Beacon. This is a here's the kayak pavilion. This is on the high tide the day after Sandy came in. So this is much lower water than it experienced. In fact, the water was flowing through the pavilion up around here. But we have a loss of service of a few hours. I mean, the water left, the place was dry, people were back getting their kayaks off the rack. So this kind of design is, I think, something we need to be really encouraging, finding innovative ways to put stuff in places that are going to be increasingly threatened, and also softening the shoreline and trying to come up with innovative engineering strategies for erosion control measures. And this is our park at Esopus Meadows Preserve across the river from here. This is a soft shoreline that we installed. These are burlap bags with planting medium and sapling shrubs. This is what it looks like today, this box. And this shoreline has now withstood 3 storm surges in the last 2 years. I think our maintenance plan now calls for 1 new bag of planting medium, about the size of this table. It's withstood it beautifully. And what's important is that it's providing much more ecological function than the brick wall we tore down and replaced it. So I think there are really great win-win opportunities in this respect. And land protection, of course, is something that's really central to our mission and creating public access by doing that. And we're putting increasing emphasis on these key sea level rise wetland migration parcels, making sure that the river can take a deep breath as the water rises and find its new angle of repose, find the places that are going to sustain these habitats over the long term as they try to adapt as well. We're putting it into our prioritization algorithm for parcel selection. And interestingly, you know, this is a place where the Hudson River Valley is leading the way. There aren't other places where, too many other places where we can get ahead of the curve and protect enough land to really make a difference. So we're really pleased to be doing that. So I think we're all aware that the events of the last fall have really changed the dialogue. And we're heading into a period where lots of things are going to be possible, both from a resource standpoint, but also from an imagination standpoint. People are open to new solutions, not doing it the same old way. The governor is speaking about places that Mother Nature owns, and when she visits them, she really visits them, and we ought to be helping people get out of those places if we can. But also a new reality in terms of investing capital dollars and making sure that those are wise investments. And so whether it's, you know, about the storm gates at the Verrazano Narrows or community-based conversations around what waterfront revitalization should look like, or the big infrastructure that sustains us all, like the rail lines and how they will respond, there is a dialogue going on, and we all have an opportunity to kind of hook into that. I hope and encourage the Greenway to really do that. This meeting is sort of timely, too, for me and at Scenic Hudson, because in the last month we've had 2 different board meetings of our Scenic Hudson and Scenic Hudson Land Trust. And at both of them we've been debating the similar topics. How do we articulate what our goals are for tackling the climate change challenge? And how do we pick the things that we think we can have the biggest impact on? The places we can move the needle in the right direction on. So I'll leave you with those questions as questions I think the Greenway can also grapple with and can have a lot of success with. I'm really encouraged to hear new grants from the Greenway on sea level rise adaptation and planning at the community level. I'm encouraged that you've invited me here to talk about how sea level rise might impact our public access investments. So I know that you are already grappling with these questions, and we're here to grapple with them with you. So thanks, and I'll take questions if I've got any time. Thanks.
President Obama in his inauguration speech mentioned climate change, which I'm sure you were delighted that he acknowledged, yes, this is a problem. As far as the national level, is Scenic Hudson being able to be part of the dialogue with the executive branch, or we can't get up that high yet?
Well, we don't. At a personal level, I have a couple of friends who are or who just were in the administration, so I send them harassing emails all the time. But I don't think those work. I think the likelihood is from the administration over the next 4 years, and this is just my personal read on it, but his spokesman said yesterday they're not going to be pushing for a carbon tax. I think the way that the administration will be seeking to make progress on climate over the next 4 years is not too different than how it's tried to make progress over the last 4. And while that may sound discouraging, the opportunities for making tremendous progress on our carbon footprint through implementing the regulations that are now proposed for new power plants, and if there's one push we could really push for would be to also implement those regulations for existing power plants. I think we'd go almost as far or just as far as if we had a sort of a watered down or weakened carbon tax. I mean, that's just sort of my read on it. But we are not sort of communicating on climate to the administration in terms of carbon emissions pathways. What we're talking to them about is the need for a federal role up and down the rivers and estuaries like ours for technical support, financial assistance, a real partnership with the federal level in helping communities get ahead of the curve on this so that we're not consistently having to pay for disasters on the back end. That's what we're telling them. Mark. And then I've got you.
First point, I think from my perspective, when folks hear about climate change, the idea is too big, suggest putting the steps that we need to take within reach, maybe pushing climate change to the back, because what we do to address climate change at a community level are things that also improve our quality of life, improve access, are things that are a function of local planning. So it's a no-lose situation, but I think those kinds of things are much more within reach for communities to address than just trying to address the macro level climate change.
Absolutely. I think that sometimes when I give this talk, I talk about all the co-benefits we would get from smart growth and resilient waterfront planning, and there are all these things that we ought to be and should be investing in anyway. They all pay for themselves over the long run, and as a kind of a bonus, we avoid catastrophes and misery and woe, but that's just really a bonus. The investments that we make in becoming more resilient and tackling climate absolutely have tremendous amounts of follow-on benefits. So I had one in the back, and then I've got Fran. Thanks for those comments. Fran?
First of all, that was a terrific presentation.
Thanks.
It's better.
Thanks.
This is the best one.
It's good to know I'm learning.
The Hudson Estuary Program, the Department of State Coastal Program, the Greenway, and partners like Scenic Hudson have been really starting to think about climate change and sea level rise since about 2006. And the recent storms really brought these issues much more to the fore as something, and with the historic Hudson River towns, it's not so much something that might happen in 20 years, but something that is happening now. So the estuary program invested in LIDAR maps of the Hudson to provide a much finer scale ability to predict, within inches as opposed to 10 feet, where sea level would go under various scenarios. And we're working with our partners in Department of State and, like I said, Greenway to start helping communities organize around getting, wrapping our heads around the fact that this isn't some possible future scenario, it's happening now. And we're going to be releasing a request for proposals any day with our partner, New England Interstate Water Pollution Control Commission, to facilitate some community roundtables like what you described, local task forces, to help one or two pilot communities organize around how to think about sea level rise. So we'll be sure that everyone here gets a copy of that request for proposals, and it's going to emphasize collaboration, bringing in different levels of government, local, state, federal, county, and also public and private partnerships and collaborations with nonprofits. So I'm sure you'll want to be available to help advise people on that, among other things. So. Sure.
Yeah, I want to thank Fran and the DEC too for really putting this kind of work in the forefront and investing, as Fran said, in the LIDAR topography. When we first started trying to model this sea level rise for the Hudson, the best topography we had was plus or minus 10 feet resolution. So if you can imagine trying to model something that happens in inch increments, and you don't really know if your data is right within 10 feet up or down, doesn't work. So Fran really made sure that this happened, and the state spent a tremendous amount of effort and money generating an absolutely world-class topography data set for us, and that's what's allowing us to do the kind of modeling we're doing now.
I'd really like to thank you and Scenic Hudson for taking on this effort. The county executive this morning talked about putting the county's efforts behind an extraordinary waterfront redevelopment in the city of Poughkeepsie, creating a world-class waterfront. And I sit on the steering committee. I'm so pleased John Clark is here because he's heading the effort. And we haven't had this discussion yet with our consultants. And my God, this is something that we have to be sure they're thinking of before they sit down on the table and start developing design plans, you know, based on input from the community. They have to be talking to people like yourself, and we want to be sure that's incorporated into the plan. So I'm really extremely grateful. Thank you.
Thanks, and we're available.
Thank you.
Do I have time for one more? Jerry?
So the timeliness of it was impeccable. One of the things that resulted from that program was many of the local communities recognized the fact that if they had all hazard mitigation plans as a requirement for FEMA funding in the future, that many of them did not address the issue of sea level rise and the storm surge issues. And we are in the process right now of talking to all of our membership communities about that process, because in order to get some of your infrastructure repaired, that component needs to be incorporated in that plan. So for the local officials, they should take a look at that document, see if it addresses it. That's one way to potentially get some funding to improve infrastructure that may be subject to sea level contamination.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the hard parts about this is finding those funding mechanisms that help communities invest in planning or invest in the hard capital costs of changing the way their town works at the water's edge. And but there are mechanisms. There's the LWRP mechanism, there's the emergency management planning process, and there's a handful of others. And I think hopefully increasingly the state will be using resources from the Environmental Facilities Corporation or other mechanisms to help communities get ahead of this problem.
Just have a question. The governor is providing resources for regions to create sustainability plans, and I know that process in the Hudson Valley has been robust. How have these ideas been incorporated into that planning process?
That's a good question. I think at a variety of levels. I think there's a strong emphasis on this regional sustainability plan on smart growth, and that to me that means not just higher density cores. To me that means resilience and looking at the kinds of hazards and being able to respond or avoid those impacts. So I think it's in there very squarely there. I think it's squarely in the there's a sort of a land preservation component to that. And one of the cheapest things that communities can do is avoid investing in bad places from the outset. Right? That doesn't cost anything to avoid doing bad things up front, because once you make an investment, you're locked into that spot. So protecting that land or doing good planning to find out where things shouldn't go is about the cheapest and smartest thing that communities can do from the outset. So I think that's part of the plan as well. Well, thanks again for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Get him unplugged here.
Yes, really.
We're a longtime partner with Scenic Hudson, and they continue to do remarkably good work, don't you think, Sarah?
Incredible. It's just, yes, a major partner of ours. Well, I think this is the moment when we turn over to the actual business of the Greenway. And so I would like to open this by just asking the Board of the Conservancy and the Council to look at their various agendas and make sure that we are set with the agenda. Any comments? Okay, so then I will ask for a motion. We have the minutes of the Conservancy, the minutes of the Council, as well as the minutes of the Greenway Grants Committee. And I would like a motion to approve those 3 sets of minutes. Sally, yes, and second, Jennifer. And then I'll call for a motion to approve the minutes. Sorry. May I have all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. And so we will move on to, I think it's your turn, Barney, to address the council.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Is it, before we, I'm calling the council meeting to order and noting that your Greenway is included in the governor's proposed budget. Of course, that's subject to the legislature. The same amount of money as last year, and that includes this grants program, which Mark will be reviewing and asking for your approval. It doesn't seem like all that much money, but the history, and Scott has been here since birth, right? It goes back, well, birth of the Greenway, is actually, we don't have the figure all the way back to the birth of the Greenway, but back to 1996, it's $2,355,000, probably $2.5 million at least, right, Scott? When you say that's a fair amount of money that goes to organizations which are really almost always municipal organizations in the valley for programs that you'll be hearing about, the ones for this year. But it's a remarkable record, and the governor has recognized that, and we are extremely grateful. Also, social notes from all over, there have been a series of lawsuits against your Greenway. Most recently, Sally is in, we're all involved in this one. The first one, we won. The second one, they went away. And the third one, once again, the Attorney General, which, in your state, our state, that's a separate branch of government, separately elected, but they have agreed to defend against without getting too complicated on this, a series of actions. There are always actions by developers who want to do something that the local organization, municipality, deems inappropriate. Is that right, Sally? Is that the better way to say it?
Basically challenging zoning law decisions that are based on Greenway concepts, smart growth initiatives, and the principles that the Greenway have adopted. And local government in taking on and supporting the Greenway through adoption of legislation for their community, the hope was that if they were challenged by developers, that the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, would support local government. And they are, they have, and they are. And in this most recent action, which is in the Court of Claims, and which of course refers to the town of Rhinebeck. Sally, you told me you had at least a couple of hundred meetings. It was 7 years of planning. We worked closely with county planning, Scenic Hudson, environmental attorneys. We had close to 600 meetings, 13 visioning sessions. We had our own website. We had attorneys and local governments from throughout the state contacting us because of the unique process that we use in terms of inclusiveness with the community.
and the concepts that we were using for smart growth initiatives. So it was a very unique process. It took many years and gained community support, except some developers were unhappy, and we were challenged twice.
But the support that we're giving to Sally and to Rhinebeck is a backup. It's part of our charter. It's in the, it was actually Steve Salant who got it into the, Senator Salant, who got it into the law. And so this is one of the benefits of the Greenway. And it's, Sally, it's important, isn't it?
It's absolutely important. It was one of the issues that was used to promote the adoption of the Greenway Compact at the local level, and that was that they would get the support and protection of the Secretary of State. That was, we expected the Attorney General to be there for us.
Right. Well, that ends that closes the Mutual Admiration Society lecture for today, and if we go on to, and you'll win. You always do. And and now we go on to Mark, and if you would go on to the you also could mention the budget again, but the community grants.
Okay.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chairman. The presentation that we just saw was great. It was a little bit of doom and gloom, and now we can go to more pleasant topics, and that's the awarding of money. But I was pleased that County Executive Molinaro mentioned Daniel Burnham as a student of planning and a self-professed planning nerd. There are some of my friends also planning nerds in the audience, Glenn, Mark, and John. Can appreciate that. And it compelled me when I was recently in Paris to drag my wife along to go find Baron von Hausmann's grave. He was the famous master planner of Paris in the 19th century. It's a really serious problem, and it can get out of hand. But one of the things that Burnham innovated at the 1893 Columbian Exposition was the idea of sanitation in cities. And it was a big problem back then. Indeed, the climate change level issue of city planning in the 19th century was what to do with all the horse manure. They, as planners will, they looked to projections, and they projected that by 1920 or 25 or so, there would be 10-foot high piles of horse manure in every street in New York City. And they had no solution until a piece of technology came along and solved their problem. Anybody know what that piece of technology was? The automobile. All right, so the technological solution for that problem creates today, or contributes to, our problem of climate change. So it's a lesson for us that the big technological solution that may happen in some future time most certainly will have unintended consequences. So focusing on the smaller things that we can do to impact climate change is a wise approach. It also has multiple benefits, as we discussed before. But it starts with planning. And on a basic level, planning, the utility of planning is to anticipate change and shape it. And our first grant today is to a community that has not adopted a new plan in over 40 years, and that is the town of Greenport in Columbia County. The town of Greenport is a rural community. It's also a community that is embarking on this planning initiative, and the Greenway hopes wholeheartedly that they will complete their plan and adopt for the first time, once the plan is completed, a zoning law, which the town also currently lacks at the moment. So here, on behalf of the town, to talk a little bit about the project, he introduced himself before as Ray Jerkowski, who is working as a consultant to the town. He was here. Is he still here? He's not here. Okay. So we can be frank. The town of Greenport really needs zoning. The Greenway is in place and supports this planning project to help them do that. In this day and age, it's ridiculous for a community not to have zoning. So we hope and support this project for the town of Greenport at the level of $7,500. All right. The next one's a great intermunicipal project. It's being hosted by the town of Fishkill, but it also includes the village of Cold Spring in Putnam County. It's essentially to create a trail between Cold Spring and Beacon along the Route 9 corridor. It's a project that the Greenway has supported in the past. It's a project that is being shepherded right now expertly by our friends at Scenic Hudson. and it's called the Hudson Fjord Trail. And the idea is to create a separated trail for pedestrians and cyclists along that corridor. The corridor presents a lot of challenges, but it's something that working together, as you know, we know in the Greenway, it can happen. So here, representing the town of Fishkill, is Supervisor Bob Lacola, and we know Bob well as the leader, one of the leaders of the Fishkill Greenway Committee. Bob, can you talk a little bit about the project, please?
Sure, and I'd like to take the opportunity. Do I need this? Yes. Okay. I'd like to take the opportunity just to thank the Greenway. With the work you've done, I want to give you some of the benefits that the town has realized. In partnership with the county's done a phenomenal job of presenting the Greenway concepts in a guide. And as a long member of the planning board in the town of Fishkill, it was a phenomenal resource. We could point to pictures in this book for developers, and we got significant changes made to several projects through basically the efforts of the Greenway. That's how it came down to us, and I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank you also for championing these initiatives. Oftentimes in government, we have to deal with politics and limited resources. So having an organization like yours out there that promotes things that just add to the fabric of society, that look for a better way of doing things, sometimes these ideas would never come to fruition. And Mark's been a real friend to the town. He's helped us countless times. He's shown up for meetings late at night, away from his family, and we appreciate it. So thank you. The Fjord Project, Mark Wildonger has been our champion here on that. His work has led to, as Mark had said, the cooperation of several municipalities. Without getting into it, it's also led to other initiatives between those municipalities that I think will lead to good things. But if you've ever been in the area, Breakneck Ridge is a real asset. Mary Kay, I'm sure, will tell you all about it, but it attracts a lot of people from all areas. But these poor folks are taking their lives in their hands by trying to get to that spot. The parking's limited. A lot of people pull up into Cold Spring, get off the train, and have to hike up. There's really no safe access. This money is going to go towards a master plan that hopefully we'll see sometime in the near future, the building of a safe pedestrian access and get people a little closer to nature. Ultimately, we're hoping that it spurs connection to the Wappinger Trail and ultimately up to the walkway over the Hudson and tying all our trails together in the Dutchess area. So thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Great. Thanks, Supervisor. And since it is an intermunicipal project, and it's significant for the region, the Greenway has previously invested in this project through the Conservancy at the level of, I think, $6,000, $5,000. But we're recommending for this grant at the level of $11,000 because of the intermunicipal effort. So our total commitment overall, once the award is made, it would be $16,000 for the project. Thank you for the help with the math there, Scott. The next one, I think, directly relates to the presentation that we just saw, and we're excited that the Village of Cold Spring is taken to heart the serious issues of climate change. I know the village was impacted in the storm surge with Hurricane Sandy, and they are working to create a plan through the Department of State Coastal Programs, LWRP program, for their waterfront. But one of the critical pieces that was lacking was really funding to address adaptation to climate change, what they need to do to their waterfront to adapt to climate change. So we are recommending $6,000 for them to include that in their overall LWRP plan to really zero in on what the village can do to anticipate that change and be prepared for it. I've been working with Ann Impellizzeri, who's leading up the Comprehensive Plan Committee and the LWRP Committee. Having worked with various communities to do that kind of planning process, I commend you for taking on that role, and you have my condolences as well, because I know how difficult that can be in the town. But Ann, can you please talk a little bit about your project?
Sure, thanks. And I should say that our real leader is Mike Armstrong, but I work closely with Mike, and we're working hard at this. We, too, have tremendous thanks to the Greenway, initially for really getting us going on this. In 2007, we had a Greenway grant to work on the comprehensive plan, which I am happy to say was adopted 5 years later in January of 2012. And this then has been wrapped into the LWRP process with thanks to the Department of State. And we are now happily in the home stretch, we think, of the LWRP. And this additional funding from the Greenway is really going to enable us to have the help we need to strengthen that program and indeed incorporate some of the challenges of sea level rise and climate change. And I must say, last September, we were sitting around and saying, how on earth are we going to get this community to grapple with the realities facing us? And of course, we all know what happened with Sandy. It kind of heads up and got people's attention. And we had a community workshop last Saturday, part of this whole process, where Kristen Marcel, thank you, Fran, came and did a presentation incorporating the very exciting map that map in this case for Cold Spring, which we had seen for Westchester communities, and you got a glimpse of with Sasha, but that's fabulous work. You have no idea. I mean, you really can look at whether a water treatment plant is high enough above future water levels, whereas the FEMA maps just didn't have that close measure there. So at any rate, many forces are coming together, and we really appreciate the Greenway enabling us to move forward with greater strength.
Great. Thank you, Ann. Now, our last grant today is, I think, an appropriate bookend to the town of Greenport, and this is the town of Newcastle, which probably has the Cadillac version of plans in the Hudson Valley. And they reached out to us to fund specifically the public outreach component of their comprehensive planning process. And that is a critical part of any comprehensive planning process, to reach out to the public, to get their ideas, and to have the general public fully engaged in the decisions that go into what their community will look like in the future. So joining us here today and representing the town of Newcastle is their comptroller, Robert Deary, to talk a little bit about the project.
Hi, thanks for inviting me. That was a great presentation. Last minute fill-in, but I'll give you a little overview of what we're looking to do here. The town last worked on their master plan in 1989, and as everybody here, the town's gone through some significant changes since then. Some of the things we're grappling with right at the moment, we've got a 114-acre campus that Reader's Digest vacated a couple years ago, and that'll be one of the objectives that the master plan is looking, what do we do to repurpose that or redevelop that. The developers come in with a few different plans. They're looking at a mixture, the current plan is a mixture of retail, office space, and also some residential. Where that'll end up, we're not sure, but what we're looking for, some assistance for funding, is our community outreach. And starting in the fall of 2013, the town is going to solicit the opinion of the all the residents in the town. We're using both traditional methods like mass mailings, but we're also looking at social media, Twitter, Facebook, and we've got a internet-based program called Mind Mixer that's going to help us look for the opinions from the residents and kind of see what they're looking for. And I believe the work on the master plan will then probably begin in 2014 once we have some of these opinions. So again, thanks for the Greenway. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Robert.
So unless there are any questions or comments, these grants have been reviewed by of course, Mark first, then the grants committee of your Greenway on a telephone meeting, and this morning in person. But now they should be reviewed, which has just happened, and approved if that is appropriate, by the Greenway. So I would now call for a motion to approve. Okay, all right. Second then, all right. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Thank you. And this is what we're about. This is money for local initiatives. Well thought, well reviewed, and approved.
It's true.
Mark, you do great work. You really do. And now, Sarah, it's all yours.
So I will now open the Greenway Conservancy portion of the meeting. And I know that Barney and Mark have already talked about the New York State budget. We all breathed a huge sigh of relief that we were in the budget, at least at the amount that we have been given in the past.
Can't talk about it too much. Just
okay, I'll just keep talking about it. We are thrilled to be included. We do have, I guess, just a couple of minor issues in front of us. That there is a correction to the small grants board packet summary for $15,000. Is there any
the correction
need to
was
talk
that
about?
we listed the incorrect amount in the materials last time, but the correct amount is reflected in the agenda here. It's $15,000.
Okay, so that I just need to inform, right? No motion.
We need a vote to convey the correct amount.
Okay, so I'm calling for a motion to approve the conveying of the correct amount of $15,000 for this for the Harlem Valley Rail Trail Association. Jane, any second? Jennifer, all in favor? Say aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion will carry. Then we have this great news of the Regional Economic Development Councils awarding the Greenway $90,000 for the Hudson River Greenway water trail. So that's tremendously exciting. I don't know, Scott, if you want to say any words about it.
We're looking to put a marketing plan into place, or implement a marketing plan, really. We're going to have a smartphone app. We're going to have a better website. What else are we doing?
Map.
A printable map that people can bring on the water with them. And we're going to try to develop a computer file that can be uploaded into a Garmin or a Magellan GPS, so people who have the waterproof ones and navigate by those will have the sites on the water when they're out on their boat or in their kayak.
Essentially, we're trying to do things to make the water trail more usable. Right now, we have 100 sites, almost 100 sites along the water trail, but it's almost hidden in plain sight. So this initiative will provide some appropriate exposure and allow kayakers of all skill levels to access it in a safe way.
Just sounds fantastic. It's now, we need to approve and accept this grant through a vote. So I will call for another motion. Donald, and a second. Anyone? Jane, thank you. And all in favor? All right, any opposed? All right, that motion to accept that grant is approved. So that's really all the business, the formal business of the Conservancy. We'll move quickly on to the... Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. Oh, this isn't very important. There was an audit done of for the year 2012, right, Scott? The past, what is the...
April 1, 2011 to March 31, 2012.
Okay, and the Finance Committee met to discuss it. The Greenway once again got a clean bill of health, which is always, running a nonprofit myself, I know what incredible work goes into getting a clean bill of health, and so I'm very admiring. I don't know if you want to say anything more about that.
The only adjusting entries we had were in-kind rent that the auditor calculates, so they feel that we're doing a good job of tracking, and what we report out to Mark is accurate.
And I'll just point out, Scott has from each year done a great job keeping the books straight. So this is, I don't know how many years in a row we haven't really had any comments in our audit, but it's really a testament to Scott's management of our finances and making sure he keeps a close eye on what money's moving where. So thanks, Scott.
Absolutely. All right, so once again, we need a motion to approve the audit findings. So, Jane. And a second. Donald, thank you. So then, all in favor? Aye. And any opposed? All right, so that motion to approve the audit findings is approved. So now we will move on to the third piece of the formal agenda, which is the Hudson River Valley National Heritage Area. And I guess we'll start with the draft economic impact study. I think that was sent out to everyone, an amazing study that I think will really give great credence to much of the work that many of us have been doing on our own scale, but to see it at this level to show the very significant economic impact that this region, but then this was really about all the, it was, Mark, I remember seeing one about all the national heritage areas as well as this, but we're talking just about this national heritage area?
The study actually includes case studies for 6 national heritage areas, and they took the data from those 6 and then extrapolated the overall impact of all heritage areas across the country.
Do you want to talk about it further? Yeah.
So it's always great to have a recent economic impact study when you go seek funding for your program. And this was a great opportunity that the National Park Service provided to 6 heritage areas, so we, of course, were the first ones to raise our hand. And the economic impact, well, I'll just take a step back and say that the overall tourism impact in the valley is $4.7 billion. And the economic impact study identified that the heritage area and the Greenway's contribution to that $4.7 billion totals over $580 million per year in the activities that we do. So it's not insignificant, I'll say that. One of the other statistics that came out of the study, and we asked them to look at this because we really didn't have a good way to calculate it, was the estimated economic impact of the Hudson River Valley Ramble each year. And the study identified that the Ramble has a $21 million impact to the Hudson Valley's economy each year. So these numbers are the ones that we're going to use when we go to Washington to advocate for investing in our program again. It's tremendously helpful to provide these statistics to members as they advocate for funding, because we can demonstrate how much this program impacts their district and how wise of an investment it is, dollar for dollar, in terms of the return on that investment. So that's basically what the impact study showed us.
Mark, do you want to stay up for the next? Because this is about Path to History,
Yeah,
and you
I'll
are the guy to talk about Path to
am.
History. I think something near and dear to certainly Betsy Jacks and others who are deeply involved in the cultural and historical part of the Hudson Valley.
So the Path Through History, I was asked by the governor's office back in, well, I'll take a step further back. Path Through History is an initiative established by Governor Cuomo to tell New York's story and to reap the benefits of doing that in terms of tourism economic development. The governor recognized that heritage tourists spend more, they stay longer when they come, and that New York's story is more significant to our national story than any other state in the nation. Even compared to Massachusetts or Virginia, the history that happened in New York State really is head and shoulders above the history that happened in those other places. But they do a better job of telling the story of their place, much better than us. So the Path Through History is about helping regions tell a better story. The governor convened 10 Path Through History work groups in the 10 Regional Economic Development Council regions across the state. Those work groups identified, much like we did with our National Heritage Area program, sites and themes that help tell their story in their region. After that, the governor convened a conference in August in Albany, and at the conference he announced $1 million as a catalyst to support heritage tourism in those 10 regions, each region being allocated $100,000. I was asked by the governor's office, I think because of our experience in the heritage area and working with diverse sets of partners, to assist in engaging the work groups to focus on the process of developing a plan and identifying projects that they will spend the $100,000 on for heritage tourism in their regions. So after this meeting today, we're having a public input meeting for the Mid-Hudson Path Through History work group to get the ideas of the public and the larger group of stakeholders, to confirm the thinking of what the work group members have been looking at already, and to get new ideas about how we can do a better job of telling our story. I will say that it's not about reinventing the wheel. The thing I said, it's about giving heritage tourism 4 more wheels and putting it into gear. Sorry about that. But it's really about looking around and finding what efforts are already out there. We have our heritage area here. The Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor spans 5 Regional Economic Development Council regions. There are 20 state-designated heritage areas in the state. And all these organizations have, and we have historic Hudson River towns, all these organizations have given serious thought and developed plans around how we tell our story. So I think that gives us a tremendous advantage in this process. It also, I think this new process, the rising tide lifts all boats, and in this case the governor's the moon, right? This much attention has never been given to heritage tourism in the state, and this much coordination has never happened. So I'm really excited to see it happening, and really excited to see this attention being paid to one of our biggest assets in New York State. So that's the summary of the Path Through History. If you can stick around for the Path Through History public input meeting. There's going to be a really flashy video. It's going to be worth your while. All right. The next update is Teaching the Hudson Valley. Teaching the Hudson Valley again this year. I believe we got something like 2,000 students to historic sites through our grants program. Debbie Duke, who is the coordinator, is doing a tremendous job, not only on administering the grants for the program, but also convening the Teaching the Hudson Valley Institute each year. Last year, the focus, because of the sesquicentennial of the Civil War, was conflict and crisis, focusing in on topics that we could use the resources in this region to teach history and some of these issues to students that relate to not only the Civil War and the military history, but also the history of civil rights and how folks deal with conflict, even including things like environmental issues. So it was a great program last year. This next year in the Institute, we're going to be focusing on Common Core standards. Common Core standards are kind of on the other end of the spectrum when you think about place-based education, because it deals with rigid testing and metrics and tracking, whereas place-based education philosophy is you get people to connect with their place, to learn what they can learn through these experiences, and then also that has the power to be more resilient in the future. But the reality of education in New York State focuses on the Common Core. So what kind of medium can we find and achieve between those two pieces? So again, Debbie Duke's been doing a tremendous job at advancing the program. The next one, I'll talk about 2 initiatives, and this gets to our exhibitions that focus on our natural and cultural resources. And the first one is the Hudson River School Art Trail. Back in May, working with the Thomas Cole National Historic Site, we announced the expansion of the Hudson River School Art Trail to double its size in the Hudson Valley and also to include other states. And these are views that were painted by the Hudson River School painters that folks can still visit today. Also at that time, we launched a really slick new website and mobile application that was developed by the Thomas Cole National Historic Site. And Betsy Jacks, I know you have some important news to share with the board, so please give us an update on where the trail is now.
Thanks. Since the expansion, we did a lot of press coverage thanks to the partnership we had with the National Heritage Area. We got an article in the New York Times, which we're very grateful for. And then just a couple weeks ago, it was announced that we were awarded a grant through the Red Sea program, the Regional Economic Development Councils that the governor formed, for an additional $50,000 to do an ad campaign for the art trail. So we're going to be starting that up in partnership with Sarah Griffin, the heads of tourism promotion in Columbia County and Greene County. We're the 4 core partners on it. So the promotion of it will continue.
Great. And the website is hudsonriverschool.org.
Yeah.
It's really slick. It's a smartphone optimized website, so you can actually go out to these locations, pull out your smartphone, and get interpretation about the view that you're seeing, including viewing the paintings that were painted of the view that you're looking at. So it's really, really cool. Stefan?
Just had a thought. It occurs to me, what if we had a Hudson River Art Trail poster mounted at Yosemite showcasing the painting, and it could discuss not only our trail to the millions of visitors at the park, but also the National Heritage Area program. Maybe we could work with Sarah to place, there's numerous national parks that our artists frequented, and it'd be a way as passports to those visitors. They'd say, oh, maybe next summer we should go to the Hudson Valley.
Well, in line with the passport program, and I think there's a site in the art trail that's in Yosemite, right? Okay. So just talk a little bit about what sites have already been identified in Yosemite and the Passport program that you're looking at.
Sure. So if you go to the Archville homepage, there are 4 pathways right now. The Hudson River Valley is the most developed, but one of them is out west. And so we've partnered with a scholar out there who knows Hudson River School and where they went and where they painted, et cetera, to identify a couple of sites out there. And so what we're planning to do is to apply for another grant and then develop that trail in partnership with them, kind of to achieve what you were describing, which is that, you know, basically they will learn about us and people here will learn about them. And so now it's just a placeholder on the website.
We need a physical sign, I think,
Yes.
at each place, and I'll install them.
And I should mention that the Art Trail website over the next month or two is going to be getting a couple more really great enhancements too. So.
Mm-hmm. And you know, along the art trail, Betsy's team developed a passport booklet. At the sites and locations, many of them right now have a rubbing medallion where you can take the passport book, get a rubbing medallion to prove that you were there. And I'm sure there's going to be at some time down the line some nice prizes if you collect all the rubbings. The next one is the Tiffany landscape windows. We've been talking about this one for a year, and we're so close to actually deploying that program. It's another exhibition that features landscape windows that were manufactured by Lewis Comfort Tiffany, obviously a great innovator in glass, inspired by the views that we have in the Hudson Valley. And these windows are all over the place, really, in our valley. And we're featuring, I believe, somewhere between like 12 and 20 of these landscape windows, mostly in churches. Each place will have an interpretive PDF that folks will be able to print out to get interpretation on the windows and to be oriented in the church when they visit. And also we're going to be encouraging them to donate to the church because these windows need to be maintained because they are really artistic treasures. Do you have anything to add to that, Chairman?
No, except that it's your hometown. I can never remember the name. Troy, right?
Troy's not my hometown. I enjoy Troy, but it's not my hometown.
But anyway, Troy, local joke. Here, Troy and Albany have an extraordinary amount of Tiffany windows. While this was Lewis Comfort Tiffany operated from New York City, in fact, those studios are still, the building is still down there on Lower Fifth Avenue, but the majority of these landscape windows, these are just landscape windows in this project, are in Albany and Troy, so that it's a quite exciting project, and Ned Pratt is working on it, and he is a resident of.
I believe he lives in Albany, but he's an architectural historian, so it's great to have him on board.
And it's a fine idea. Anybody who would like to become part of this and work on it. When you go to the Metropolitan Museum and you go in the American Wing, you can see there are two landscape windows on display there. Now this is the heritage area. So New York City is not included in the heritage area, but that doesn't stop anyone from going to the Metropolitan Museum, I suppose. Okay. Anyway, you're doing great stuff.
Thanks. We're going to, I believe, include the one in the Met as part of as an anchor to the exhibit. So if people want to see that, they can go see it and then be inspired to get up into the Hudson Valley to see all the other ones. The final project that we're working on, and it's getting closer, is the Washington-Rochambeau Revolutionary Route. Back in March, a team from the National Park Service Harpers Ferry Center, which are the experts, do the interpretation for national parks across the country, came to the lower Hudson Valley, did site tours, and identified spots for interpretation along the Washington-Rochambeau Revolutionary Route. It's the route that the French and American armies took to the final victory at Yorktown in Virginia in the Revolutionary War, and it passed through the lower Hudson Valley. So these sites we're focusing on are the French encampments. I received last week the proposal document from the National Park Service consultant. Jim Johnson's holding it right there, if anybody wants to take a look at it. It identifies essentially the stories that are going to be told at the different sites, what the interpretive panels will look like, how all the pieces are going to fit together. We were very excited to have the funding and then give the funding to the Park Service to be able to do that. It's the first project along the National Historic Trail, first interpretive project along the National Historic Trail, so this will be the model of how the trail will be interpreted moving forward from Rhode Island all the way down to Virginia. So we're very excited about it.
Why don't you ask Jim to say something to the Frank T. Bumpus Endowed Chair at Marist College is held by Colonel Johnson, and you could say a few words about this, Jim.
Yes, we're honored to have a chair now, an endowed chair. It started out as a professorship in Hudson River Valley history at Marist College. I now occupy the chair. It's been upgraded with a new endowment to a chair. So it heightens the awareness of the Hudson River Valley academically as your academic arm for the National Heritage Area. So you have helped get the Hudson River Valley Institute. You have helped now as we move forward in the academic arena with the chair. And so we're here to serve. This has been a project that we've been working on. We started this at Washington's headquarters in Newburgh in December of 1999. And with Mark's help and Barney's help, we were able to get $300,000 from the Department of Transportation, which Mark was able to get transferred to the National Park Service to do the work. So we're really happy that this is moving forward. We've made available to you board members the latest issue of the Hudson River Valley Review. This is our contribution, not only understanding the population of Albany, which is the cover story after the American Revolution, but also the bicentennial of the War of 1812. Now, we had to stretch the Hudson a bit to get us into that story, but we felt that we ought to at least think about the 200th anniversary of the unknown, forgotten war, the War of 1812, and so you'll see two articles in here that help you understand that. We're also sponsoring a lecture on the 18th of April that will feature an article. The lecture is becoming an article, which will be the cover article for the next Hudson River Valley Review about West Point. General Lance Petros will speak on his book, Carved from Granite, West Point from 1902. So those are the programs that are going on at your Hudson River Valley Institute. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Colonel. Next on the agenda, with your permission, is the 2012 Greenway Annual Report. This will be brief. I won't read the report verbatim to you. But, one of the main things of late, and I think it, kind of permeates American politics and certainly state politics, is jobs. I mentioned the economic impact report that was done for the National Heritage Area, and it gave us that number, which is something that we'd never had before. Over 6,500 jobs are supported by what we do, and that's a huge number. The Greenway from day one has approached, or was given the mission of trying to support and advance the idea that the Hudson River Valley is a unified destination. It's always challenging working with different regional partners. People's own definitions of region may vary, but we have, over the last 20 years, all of our partners worked to first identify the Hudson River Valley and identify with it as a region, and then identify it as a destination. And now we really are identified as a world-class destination, with National Geographic identifying the Hudson River Valley as one of its top best locations in 2013. I think that stature is something that we really have never achieved before as a valley, and it's something that I think heralds in a new reality for us in terms of how we look at our resources in the valley. The Regional Economic Development Councils convened by Governor Cuomo identify tourism and natural resources as key components of an overall economic development strategy. I mean, that's an attitude that is relatively new, and I think that the partners around the table here have contributed to that evolution of thought, that protecting and preserving and promoting our natural and cultural resources is not some optional thing that we can do, but it's really real economic, I'll quote, real economic development. It is real economic development. It's not a roadway subsidy. It's not paying for asphalt. But it does create jobs. And the things that we do to invest in those resources also translate into an increased quality of life for people that live in the Hudson River Valley. So for me, it's a no-lose situation, and its return on investment is often much higher, and the cost per job of that investment is much lower than traditional economic development approaches. So I'm pleased that the Regional Economic Development Councils are looking at tourism as such a significant piece of the overall portfolio for how economic development is done in this region and other regions across the state. And we've almost graduated. We've almost been invited to the table. Well, we have been invited to the table, so we're pleased to have had that opportunity and contributed to it. But what has the Greenway done to support that idea this year? Well, with the help of Carl Beard and the National Park Service Rivers and Trails program, our water trail, which we received a $90,000 grant for, was named a national water trail, one of the first 13 in the country, Carl?
9.
One of the first 9 in the country.
There may be 13 now.
And that designation contributed significantly to the awarding of the $90,000 grant. It's a tremendous asset, and we are going to leverage that designation as much as possible. We also, in partnership with Parks and Trails New York this year, launched the Cycling the Hudson Valley Guidebook. It's a companion guidebook to the one that they developed for the Erie Canal corridor. Our situation in the Hudson Valley is a little bit different than the Erie Canal because the Erie Canal corridor is almost entirely contiguous in terms of an off-road path or an on-road path where you can get from Albany to Buffalo. In the Hudson Valley, it's a lot more challenging. But we identified a huge loop that goes down the east side of the Hudson River and then through New York City and then up the west side of the Hudson River to provide the most compelling experience for cyclists, to connect cyclists to communities, to connect them with historic sites. Cyclists, like heritage tourists, spend a lot of money. More people participate in cycling than any other recreational activity, so it makes sense. What it also does for the Greenway, it gives us a contiguous trail to look at that goes from Albany to Manhattan. A contiguous trail from Albany to Manhattan was the goal of the Greenway, and we're still working towards it. A riverside trail. Well, now we have identified a contiguous on-road trail that we can connect to knit together that vision of a Greenway trail. It's been over 20 years, and we're still working on it. We will continue to work on it. But now we have something on a map. It's not just a vague notion of something that should be done, but we actually have something that we can look at on the map. It's not the final route. It's probably not even the most preferred route, but it's something on a map that represents that trail. The Hudson River School Art Trail. Betsy, mentioned that. Great coverage in the New York Times. One of the things about the Greenway is, yes, we do the policy and the planning stuff to get communities to do the right things to protect what they have, but we also want to get people to care about this place, because if they care about this place, they're more likely to become stewards of it. So the Greenway program hits it from the policy and planning side and also the interpretation side. And the Hudson River School Art Trail is one of the most dynamic and compelling projects that we've been involved in recent memory. It's dynamic because it's about art, but it also connects directly with recreation. And one of the things that we can export in our region are the views. So, of course, we have to attract people here. And the investment in getting the coverage in the New York Times and the investment that Betsy's folks have made into the website, I think is going to pay tremendous dividends in that economic impact number. And then our events this year. The Hudson River Valley Ramble, $21 million impact. Heritage Weekend. We had over 206 events across the state. It was an amazing partnership program this year. And also Hudson River Day, working in partnership with the Estuary program. All of those events are going to be happening in 2013, even bigger and better. We're repackaging Heritage Weekend to be Path Through History weekends to leverage the momentum of that program and gain the support of the Governor's Office and I Love New York to make that even bigger and better. And Hudson River Day will also be a bigger and better event this year. We're partnered with many other organizations, Riverkeeper, Metropolitan Waterfront Alliance, Clearwater, and that's going to be a big event. And all those contribute to economic development in the Hudson Valley. But none of that would be possible without the work of our efficient and small staff. So the main thing that is the takeaway from this, and the takeaway from the report that you see and all the projects that are listed in it, is that they don't happen without the people that work for the Greenway. Scott Keller, Beth Campachero, Emily Gardner, they are really the folks that are making it happen, and please join me in thanking them for the work that they're doing. That's my annual report, folks. Thanks.
Ms. Sarah, this concludes the Greenway meetings and the Heritage Area. The Heritage Area is, Mark?
Yes.
How would you describe the Heritage Area legislation?
We're not anticipating funding in the 2013 federal budget, but our partners in Washington are approaching the problem from every angle possible. That's what I can say about the legislation.
We are one of
49 heritage areas, but one of 12 heritage areas whose funding eligibility expired on September 30th, 2012.
So the others are still going, but we have a lot of strong partners.
We do have a lot of strong partners in Washington, and the governor is also a strong partner in New York State, investing and leveraging his Washington, D.C. office to help in the effort as well.
So if anybody asks you about the Heritage Area, say yes. And now is there any other, now, Sarah, is there any other business that properly come before the meeting? Any questions, comments? Because this is going to be followed by
the Path Through History public input meeting, starting at 1. I encourage you to all stick around and let your voices be heard in that process. It's going to be a fun meeting. It gets back to the roots of what I like to do and, facilitate public planning processes. So it should be fun. I encourage you to stick around.
Jennifer, I had to leave before the end of the last National Heritage Area meeting, and I was just wondering if you were looking for any input or actions by board members as you appeal the funding.
I mean, I guess I have two answers to that question, is that we have already tremendous support from the Hudson Valley delegation. Senators, Gillibrand is sponsoring a bill, Senator Schumer is on board, and all the members of Congress are on board. So in terms of having to lobby them for supporting the program, I don't think we need to do that. But certainly, as you go out into the community and work with your partners and the folks that you deal with, the best thing you can do for the Heritage Area is talk about the program. Encourage people to participate in it. Encourage people to simply have the brochures at their site. Because the more people that know about it, the stronger the program, the more resilient it's going to be. It's not just about the money, but it's about the network of people that are committed to the idea of the National Heritage Area and to telling our story through the program.
Stefan would be a good one to remind us all that it was Maurice Hinchy who got it started back in, you see, how old?
1996.
96 at the Heritage Area. And Maurice was one of the original we were one of the first three.
I think we were one of the first dozen, I believe.
First dozen, anyway. And so there you are. Any other questions, comments, Sarah? Okay. I guess the only other thing is to remind you all that the next meeting is on the 13th.
March 13th.
Which is not a Friday, which is a Wednesday. And where will that be, Mark?
We're accepting nominations of locations as we speak.
Okay.
And I will mention, we are on Friday this time because we had to work around your schedule.
It is when we do it around. All right. Well, there you go. Thank you all very much. And and thank you, Sarah, particularly, as always, for being our marvelous hostess. Thank you. Bye-bye. All right.